In this video, I'm going to draw the mammal phylogeny for you, at least a current thinking on the mammal phylogeny. So, our lineage diverged from other lineages of vertebrates through this synapomorphy of having a skull with one postorbital fenestra. And these amniote animals were known as synapsids. So stem mammals didn't look very mammal-like at all. In fact, some synapsids are frequently included with our dinosaur packs, even though they don't belong there. Things like Dimetrodon. What does Dimetrodon look like? I thought I had one handy. I don't. But you've probably seen Dimetrodon and thought, oh, that's a cool dinosaur, but it's not a dinosaur at all. Anyway, what it is it's a synapsid. And one of the characters that it possesses that is a very mammalian character is having heterodonty, or having more than one kind of tooth. That's what Dimetrodon means, two-sized teeth. Dimetrodon, different sized teeth. Okay? So this little line here is actually representing a very long span of time. Many, many characteristics between these ancestral synapsids that had one postorbital fenestra and two different sized teeth, to having fur-bearing, live birth having, warm-blooded, four-chambered heart, all of that. That line represents pretty much most of those things, except one of those things I mentioned is not like the others, and that would be the live birth having, because the monotremes, of which there are about, I think 5, maybe there's a new species described, maybe 6 species. These are your egg-laying mammals. So yes, like the platypus, and also echidnas. I think there's only one still living species of platypus, but there are 4 or 5 species of echidnas still around, all found in Australia and Papua New Guinea, that area of the world. Fun fact, monotremes, they don't have nipples. They have kind of patches of skin where the young can lap at the milk. The mothers still produce milk, but they don't have nipples, and therefore they don't have lips, because lips are something that are needed for suckling, which monotremes don't do. So like the duck-billed platypus has a duck's bill, and an echidna has kind of like a tubular snout-like arrangement. So those are your monotremes. Still not quite live birth having. Are our marsupials. And there's around about more than 360 species left of marsupials. These are animals that produce their young in a pouch. Well, they don't produce the young in the pouch. Essentially, the young are born in a very precocial state, very altricial state. They emerge from the vagina as not much more than a fetus, and then they crawl up into the marsupium, the pouch, where they latch onto nipples, and that's where they grow and develop. They kind of complete their development inside that pouch. So this includes, things that we know about: kangaroos, koalas, wombats, opossums. That's the only species of marsupial that we have living here in North America. And many other marsupial species, numbats, and a number of different things. Okay, so those are your marsupials. So not quite live birth, but something close to it. And it is at this junction here that we get into our live birth having placental mammals. Like you and me and my dog that I'm petting right now, and all the other the bulk of mammalia is found within the placental mammals. Within this early branching lineage, thought to have diverged mostly within Africa. So the name Afrotheria means African mammals, although, as we will find, it's not quite so cut and dried as you might be thinking. You might be like, what are Hyracoidea? And if I say, oh, they're hyraxes, you might say, oh, that's not really helpful. What are hyraxes? Hyraxes are fairly small mammals that they're about the size of like a terrier. And they are often found in southern Africa. In South Africa, they call them dassies. But you would not suspect that their closest relatives would be things like Sirenia, which are manatees and dugongs, and Proboscoidea. Proboscoidea are modern elephants, as well as extinct things like mammoths and mastodons. So all of these mammals were thought to have diverged from each other in Africa, although mammoths and mastodons were found in North America. Manatees we find in North America. Dugongs are found in Asia. So our modern thinking about where these animals occur, not entirely helpful. Xenarthra means weird joints, strange joints. Xeno, like xenophobia, strangers. Arthra, like arthropods or arthrophoda, are joints. These animals all have it seems like they have additional vertebrae to enable them to kind of have more of an arched back. And many of these are found in South and Central America. So the Xenarthra includes things like 2- and 3-toed sloths, anteaters, and armadillos. And of these, you probably have the greatest familiarity with armadillos, seeing as the 9-banded armadillo is one of the few mammal species that is increasing its range. It's found throughout North America and Central America. But there are many other species of armadillos too, some of which are adorable. Anteaters, as it turns out, ant-eating as a mode of nutrition, that type of insectivory or insect eating is highly polyphyletic within the mammals. So some of the echidnas are referred to as spiny anteaters, but those are monotremes. So these types of anteaters are things like tamanduas and the giant anteaters that if you go to the zoo and it just says, this is a giant anteater, that's in the Xenarthra, and it's something that is more closely related to things like sloths and armadillos. So Boreoeutheria means the northern true placental mammals. So these were all thought to have diverged from each other in ancient northern supercontinent. So over here on this branch, I'm going to put two groups that you probably won't be surprised that they go together. Lagomorpha and Rodentia. And you might be forgiven for thinking that lagomorphs, which are rabbits, jackrabbits, hares, were rodents. Rodents, which includes mice, rats, beavers, squirrels, and on and on. You might be forgiven for thinking that lagomorphs are part of the Rodentia. They are not. They share a clade with the Rodentia, but unlike rodents, which have ever-growing incisors, they grow continually throughout their lives, lagomorphs only have a finite amount of incisor growth. And what might surprise you a little bit more than finding that these are two separate things is that this is where we find ourselves. Our own clade, the primates, our own order. So the primates includes monkeys, tarsiers, lemurs, all of the great apes. So chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, gorillas, and us. That's our spot right there. But don't zone out just yet, because I finally told you where you belong in this whole tree, because we still have a little bit more of the Boreoeutheria to talk about. I always like to include this group of mammals as well, mostly because of the name. Eulipotyphla means truly fat and blind, which is totally rude. But this includes moles and hedgehogs and a number of other kind of small insectivorous species. So again, we're seeing insectivory here with the anteaters, insectivory here with the echidna, insectivory here with moles and hedgehogs and things. So highly polyphyletic. Chiroptera means hand wing, and that gives you a clue that this is the bats. Bats, which are surprisingly one of our most diverse groups of mammals. Now there is an order of mammals called the carnivora, which doesn't mean the only things that eat meat or are carnivores are mammals. You know that there are a number of other animals that eat meat. Think about like eagles, hawks, raptors, birds of prey. They are carnivorous, but they are not in this order known as carnivora. Also within the carnivora, we have two suborders. The Caeniformia and the Feliformia. The Caeniformia are the dog-like carnivores, and the Feliformia are the cat-like carnivores. So the Caeniformia actually includes dogs, wolves, coyotes, as well as bears, seals, walruses, all of the pinnipeds, and a number of other familiar mammals. The Feliformia, the cat-like carnivores, includes house cats as well as all of the big cats, skunks, weasels, and a number of other meat-eating mammals. Turns out the Feliformia tend to be more carnivorous than the Caeniformia. The Caeniformia tend to be more omnivoria, if you will, but they're not called that. Okay, and our last two major orders of mammals, and there are others that I have not included, but just sort of try and knock out the most familiar mammals, are the Perissodactyla and the Cetartiodactyla. These are both considered to be ungulates or grazers. Perissodactyla are odd-toed ungulates. So this includes horses and all horse-like things, so like zebras, donkeys, things like that. Tapirs and rhinoceroses, as it turns out, are in the Perissodactyla. Cetartiodactyla used to be two separate orders, but they've been merged together because we discovered that they share a clade. CET, as in cetacean, so this is going to be whales, dolphins, porpoises, etc. Other obligate marine mammals. Artiodactyla, these are the even-toed ungulates. So this is going to include cattle, deer, sheep, giraffes, also pigs, and other organisms that have the cloven hoof or the two toes. And that's your rough, quick and dirty mammal phylogeny. So most important things, know the difference between monotremes, marsupials, and placental mammals. That's the most important thing. So kind of realizing how the major groups diverge from each other, not necessarily all of the granular details that are in here. They're what's going to be important for you going into the final.